Welcome to Beyond the Coverage. I'm Chris Horner. In today's edition, I want to talk about the worst job in the Peloton. So, it must be the sprinters, right? Do the sprinters have the worst job in the professional Peloton? We're getting ready to start the 24 Tour de France. We know there's an epic list of 4 of the favorites of the general classification with Remco, Tade, Jonas, and Primoz Roglic, all racing for their big budgeted teams. And then we'll throw in Ineos as another big budget team, where we look at those 5 teams. They don't even have what we would call a pure sprinter that they're bringing to the Tour de France. Yes, I know Visma, Lease Bike have Wout van Aert. He is the best sprinter in the world in my book, but he's kind of a hybrid sprinter. A lot of people don't even consider him a sprinter because he wins so much in other areas. He can time trial, he can win sprints, he can win Mont Ventoux, he can win on the Champs, he can win everywhere. So he's kind of a hybrid sprinter. He is the best in my book, of course, of all the sprinters. But when we're talking about the pure sprinters, do they have the worst job in professional Peloton? It's got to be one of the most dangerous. There's no doubt about that. It's got to be the one that's taken advantage of throughout the whole of the European Peloton, where when the teams start off in their small budget, they try to find themselves some sprinters for sure. They become a medium budget like Jaco Lula, and they bring in a Dylan Groenewegen in there, and they have Caleb Ewan on that team. Dylan Groenewegen starting the Tour de France. Caleb Ewan did the Giro d'Italia. But when there's a middle budget team, those sprinters are highlighted. They're loved over there. They're treated like gold and like royalty. And then you get up to the big budget teams, what happens? They get kicked off. They can't even be appreciated. Mark Cavendish in 2021 at the Tour de France, he was going for Eddie Merckx's most single stage victories ever. At 34, he needed 35 to win. He won 4 stages of the Tour de France in 2021, but they gave up stage 12 because they put Julian Alaphilippe, pseudo quick-step, in that front move, and they were like, we don't need the race to try to win another stage with Mark Cavendish. We got Julian Alaphilippe in the front group of about 14, 13 riders up there, and they're thinking like, pseudo quick-step that is, we got Julian Alaphilippe up there, we don't have to do anything. I remember even at NBC, before that stage started, all of us from the commentators were huddled around. We were saying, Mark Cavendish can win this stage. There's no doubt about it. He can win this stage. He can start breaking Eddie Merckx's record. And instead of Break gets up the road with one Julian Alaphilippe in there for the Frenchman, the 2-time road world champion, they put him in there, pseudo quick-step, and they won't even race for Mark Cavendish. It was ridiculous. On top of that, NBC commentators, Bob Roll, I remember him arguing with me live on air saying that this is a great move for pseudo quick-step because they got Julian Alaphilippe in the front group. I was like, this is a great move. Bob, this is a great move that they're letting Julian Alaphilippe go up in this group here when you have Cavendish that can break the record. We argued again later on stage 19 when it was Davide Ballerini from pseudo quick-step going up in the 21 Tour de France to be in a group that was massive in size, and they had Cavendish in the back. Mate Mohoric ended up winning that stage. And I remember the same argument. Why would pseudo quick-step race for Mark Cavendish? Why wouldn't they? Sorry, excuse me. That was a big-time mistake there. Important words. Why wouldn't you? Why would you? But certainly you would race for Mark Cavendish. He was on a roll. There was no pure sprinters left in the race of quality because Peter Sagan and Caleb Ewan had crashed early in the first week of the Tour de France. Cavendish was picking up wins all over the place and was ready to break Eddie Merckx's record, but pseudo quick-step, they just threw that out the window when they let Julian Alaphilippe in that move and Davide Ballerini in the next move on stage 19. And I'm literally arguing with Bob Roll saying that this is ridiculous. We all agreed in the morning that this is fantastic stage for Mark Cavendish to be able to win. All of a sudden, pseudo quick-step put a guy in there, they're happy to let it go, and the other commentators at NBC were happy to let that go too. I was the only one arguing that why would we agree in the morning that you're going to race for Mark Cavendish because this looks fantastic and we're all agreeing he can win this stage if it comes into a field sprint, and instead you stop racing for him and you let other guys on the team go for a victory instead of giving Cavendish a chance to break Eddie Merckx's record. Well, we saw at the Champs, he had one more chance to break the record and go 35 stage wins at the Tour de France, and then he came up snake eyes as he was too far back with 1.8 kilometers to go. He left his teammate Michael Morkov's wheel, and then he couldn't beat Wout van Aert, who was flying on form throughout the 21 Tour de France. Started really slow, then just kept getting better and better and better. And by the Champs, it was easy to see when you went to bed the night before that Wout van Aert was going to win on the Champs and hold back the record from Mark Cavendish because he was going so well, Wout van Aert that is, once we got late into the Tour. And Pseudo Quickstep had already given up that stage 12 and stage 19 opportunities to break the records. So then you go into 2022, Pseudo Quickstep, they won't even bring Mark Cavendish. They end up bringing Fabio Jakobsen to the Tour de France, and yes, he won a stage early in the first week, stage 2 if I remember correctly. He wins there, but then he has a problem getting over the mountains and he doesn't win again. But they didn't even bother bringing Mark Cavendish, who won them 4 stages the year before. I'm telling you guys, it's a hard job to be a sprinter over the European peloton because as the team grows, they just forget the sprinters. When I was there with Lotto, they had the fabulous, one of the best sprinters in the world. Robbie McEwen was on the team. And even there with Lotto, when I first raced with them in 2006, we had Cadel Evans on the team, and they knew that Cadel Evans could go top 10, so that was a priority for the team. Now, they weren't a big budgeted team, so they couldn't bring a stack of climbing roster riders like we see on UAE Team Emirates in 2024, but if they had it, they probably would have brought them all and left Robbie McEwen off the team, even though he was winning left and right and certainly was one of the premier sprinters that 2006 and 2007 season at the Tour de France. But there's no love for the sprinters once the team starts to grow. I'll bring it even a little bit more in depth when you start looking at some of the other riders. When you start looking at Dylan Groenewegen, for example, guys, he used to ride for Jumbo-Visma. Okay, there's a little more drama attached to Dylan Groenewegen because there was that crash in Poland against Fabio Jakobsen, but he rode for Jumbo-Visma and they got rid of him. They would have never gotten rid of. Can you imagine them get rid of Jonas Vingegaard? If something had happened, there was some controversy, they wouldn't get rid of him, but they would get rid of Dylan Groenewegen. Now we look at Fabio Jakobsen, who ended up winning a stage in 2022 that took Cavendish's spot away. But he's not even on the team at Pseudo Quickstep anymore because they have Remco Evenepoel. They bumped him off the list. You go down to Pascal Ackermann, who's going to be racing this year at the Tour de France too. He came from UAE Team Emirates. They didn't keep him either because they're just bringing all pure climbers and building a team around Tadej Pogacar. So he had to switch teams. He's not even on that team anymore, Pascal Ackermann with UAE Team Emirates. He's done and gone. Realistically, the only sprinters that the big teams keep, Wout van Aert, because he's a hybrid sprinter, right? And Mads Pedersen. Those guys go everywhere, right? They build teams because they know those guys can look after the GC guys deep into the climb. Okay, I'm a road snob. You know that. I don't care about the cyclocross races. I couldn't give you a flying mile on the track. I don't know who did the quarter-mile sprint or who won the chase there at the track events before. I don't watch the 6-day races. I watch road racing because I'm a road snob and I'm a GC guy, so I understand why the big budget teams want the GC riders. You could finish top 10 at a Grand Tour, and that's more important than winning a stage at the Tour de France to other teams, and that's why we see those big sprinters. They get bumped off once the budget of the team starts going up. And even when we look at Pseudo Quickstep, one of the 5-6 biggest budget teams here, and they plan on trying to win with Remco Evenepoel, they still got a spot open, and they have Tim Miller. Tim Miller is hands down, no doubt about it, one of the top 5, if not top 3 sprinters of the 24 season right now. And Tim Miller doesn't even have a spot on the Tour de France. That's why he went over to the Giro d'Italia. Now, I remember seeing a comment earlier asking me personally if I'd bring Tim Miller if I'm Pseudo Quickstep's manager, Patrick Lefebvre. And I said with 100% certainty I'd bring Tim Miller because at this moment, we don't exactly know where Remco Evenepoel's form is for Pseudo Quickstep if he can compete with the other 3 big-time favorites that realistically, Jonas Vingegaard, with his 2-time Tour de France wins in the past, you're only going to build full-on GC team around him, except for Wout van Aert because he's a hybrid, of course, I know that. And then we look at Tadej Pogacar, 2-time Tour de France champion too. They're only going to bring climbers around him. Primoz Roglic, well, he almost won the Tour de France in 2020. So Bora Hansgrohe's bringing more pure climbers to the race. There's no doubt about that. They got some speed in there too, but nobody's a fast field sprinter at the Tour de France type level that's coming over for Bora Hansgrohe. But when you look at Pseudo Quickstep, would I bring Tim Miller? I would bring Tim Miller if I'm Patrick Lefebvre, with the only exception if Julian Alaphilippe, the Frenchman who was on flying form at the Giro, if he kept his training sharp, if he's still on form, if he said, hey, Patrick Lefebvre, why don't you extend my contract, pay me some money, and then I'll do the Tour de France too. Of course, I'd bring Julian Alaphilippe on the team because Remco Evenepoel is a shot at winning the Tour de France in terms of general classification. There's no doubt about that. It's smaller than the first three. There's clearly, we understand why. The first three are winning Grand Tours left and right. But Remco Evenepoel, when we look at him, we got to believe that there's room for one Tim Miller. As long as you're bringing him in the squad and you just say, hey, Tim, you're going to be on your own when it comes to making the time cut over the mountains. So you're going to have to climb with the other sprinters when they get dropped, and you're going to have to hold on for dear life for them, because if you get left on your own, we're not going to send a team back for you when we have Remco Evenepoel on the team. And on top of that, it's important for Tim Miller to understand that he has to help out with Remco Evenepoel if they get in crosswind sections. But if you get in the last 5 kilometers, I would give the green light to Tim Miller. But you look at Soudal Quickstep, and he's not even on the list. And for sure, I understand he did the Giro, so he might not have the legs. But for sure, in January, when he was coming up with the list here of favorite races he'd like to do, he would have been the Tour de France, put on the list for the Tour de France over the Giro any day of the week. Did win 3 stages of the Giro, though, and won the last stage against Johnny Milan. Of course, had a little bit of help there when Johnny Milan had the bike change there with 1 lap to go, 9 kilometers. But Tim Miller's on flying form. He can win a stage at the Tour de France. And they still don't even have him on the list, guys. The job of the sprinters, it's a nasty one. You come into the finish, the last final 5 kilometers of any sprint stage, it's going to be chaos all over the place. They have to make split-second decisions. Now they have to be a little bit cleaner in their decision-making. In the old days, you could get to the front, and then you could hook a rider to the curb. You could hook them to the fence, and they loved that, and the TV cameras loved it, and the fans at home, most of them loved it. It was a nasty, dirty job out there for the sprinters. They're making it a little bit cleaner coming into the finish now for the sprinters, but it's still a very dangerous job that when I look up here on Beyond the Coverage, it's just not as appreciated as it should be. But then again, I'm a road snob and a GC snob, so I can understand why the 5 best teams in the world, if not 6, don't want to bring a pure sprinter unless you're a rider like Mads Pedersen, unless you're a rider like Wout van Aert that can do a little bit of everything. Those teams just don't have any appreciation for the pure sprinters. That's why they've kicked them literally off their teams in the past, and that's why the pure sprinters, the best in the world, basically have to go to a mid-level budgeted team, if not a bottom budgeted team, in order to guarantee that they get themselves into the Tour de France. So when you start watching these first stages, stage 1, of course, is going to be a stage for the GC battles going full gas. Stage 2, possibly a stage for some of the sprinters, certainly the hybrid sprinters like Wout van Aert and Mads Pedersen. Then stage 3, when you really start seeing the action, curb-to-curb action from all the top sprinters here at the Tour de France, you got to appreciate them, at least for 5 kilometers, the last final 5 kilometers of the stage. Longer than that, well, you don't really see their mugs much in the Tour de France. But that last 5 kilometers, they have the most dangerous job in the Tour de France, no doubt about that. So give a little bit of appreciation out there for some of the sprinters, because they got the hardest job in the professional peloton. Trying to keep their job on the best teams in the world is difficult enough. Trying to win races at the Tour de France with how dangerous it is. And then for some of them, just trying to make the time cut is complicated enough for some of the sprinters. So make sure you appreciate the sprinters, at least for the last 5 kilometers of every sprint stage. Tune in, like, and subscribe. Guys, we are super close to the Tour de France starting proper, as the 29th of June is coming up around the corner. So hit the like and subscribe button, and I'll see you guys on the next edition real soon.